Hello and welcome to another edition of NYBJ Media Watch. I'm your host, Eric Tait, and with me is
Bob Anthony, your co-host.
Bob Anthony is Media Watch's co-chair, and I'm the other co-chair of NYBJ Media Watch. Once again, thank you for joining us. We're going to try to touch on some of the things happening nationally and locally, as we always do. We try to provide a report card, or at least give you a quick update on what the media may be missing or not dealing with as quickly as or as in-depth as they should.
Yes, we have a couple of local stories and some more wide-ranging.
Certainly. Actually, this year's Monday, so tomorrow, folks, will be the mayoralty election for the city of New York. So make sure you get out and vote. But even as it's in the last throes just before election, there have been some serious negative turns in the in the campaigning. Tell me your take on Joe Loda's salvo about the squeegees and the bad crime coming back.
Well, it came after one of the most recent polls, where I guess he's still behind by sort of a 40 point margin in the latest poll, and he came out with the TV ad you're talking about.
That's a television ad, right?
Which relates to de Blasio allegedly leading New York back into the bad 70s, when we had graffiti on the subways, when crime was ridiculously high.
Crack dens everywhere.
Right, and the ad is a throwback to some of the scare ads we had in some of the some notable presidential campaigns. But I was taken aback by it.
I was totally surprised. I hadn't been paying that close attention because basically Joe Loda had such a low profile anyway. But what I had seen of him, he just seemed to be a fairly efficient civil servant, head of the MTA, been in public service for quite some time. Seemed like a competent guy. But I just felt, he was going to be swamped because New York's a heavily Democratic city anyway.
Right, and de Blasio obviously had a head start in terms of a citywide
public advocate job.
Yes.
So, and he used that public advocate job to great advantage in that he hit some serious issues that more affordable housing, better use of the educational facilities, better schools, less dumping on teachers in the public schools. So he made a platform of that. So he had much, and plus he had that big Democratic primary to get more publicity.
Right, which was as you know, heavily fought between Quinn and Lou and himself and Bill Thompson.
Yeah.
So the primary sucked in a lot of publicity, which obviously was to his advantage. Whereas the Republican side was relatively not that big of a battle.
Right. So I didn't have a negative impression of Joe Loda.
And I didn't either, given his tenure at the MTA.
Right.
I thought, relatively speaking, he wasn't too bad of a...
Kind of a straight shooter kind of guy, is the way he seemed,
yes.
Until things got desperate, and sadly, boom, here comes this negative ad. So...
the reporting on that I'll give a B to, because the news media did jump on that right away, and they hit him on that. They questioned, well, how will de Blasio swiftly cast the city back into this deplorable state? And obviously there was no clear answer to that.
No real answer.
But the ads continue till this morning. I noticed it was still running.
You mean last Wednesday morning?
Yes, last Wednesday morning. I'm sure it'll continue
it might
until
still be running right through to tomorrow's vote.
Have to remember we tape ahead.
Tomorrow's vote, right? So, but it's interesting because when he harked to that negativity about crime raising its ugly head, I think he was also trying to take a pass at de Blasio for de Blasio's stand on wanting to, if not do away with stop and frisk, at least revamp the use of the stop and frisk technique that the New York Police Department has been using, that has been declared unconstitutional,
right.
That we've been saying for 3 or 4 years now on Media Watch.
Right, we've covered that rather heavily, I got to say.
So it's interesting because very much, I haven't heard Ray Kelly say anything, but I suspect that Bill de Blasio will probably be looking for a new police commissioner. Let me put it this way. I hope Bill de Blasio will be looking for a new police commissioner, especially since the New York Police Department thinks it wants to appeal the judge's ruling on stop and frisk.
And that's obviously not going to play into de Blasio's administration if that's the way Ray Kelly wants to do it.
Yeah.
And I'm sure at this point he can see the writing on the wall if he had any intention of
trying to hang on, right. But you had a related Ray Kelly story.
Yes.
That happened last week when we were taping this. Recently, actually.
Right. Mr. Kelly showed up at Brown University up in Providence, Rhode Island, to talk about police procedures, etc.
Police procedures.
And other things. It obviously being the commissioner of a large city and having to deal with it. With different ethnic groups, etc. But he showed up to speak to the students at Brown, and they immediately started shouting him down, and to the point where the event had to be canceled. He did not make his comments.
Okay, let me backtrack. So it was a scheduled speaking engagement.
Right. It was
for a particular entity at Brown University.
It was sort of a panel discussion, or either it was starring him or he was part of that panel.
Okay.
I'm not sure what it was.
And so I don't know what the numbers were, but you're saying there was such a student demonstration to the point where they were so demonstrative that the college had to cancel the event?
It was a large audience. It was well attended, and I heard the radio tape of it, and the students were shouting pretty loud. They were chanting stop and frisk tactics. I forget what the chant was. But at the end of the day, the event couldn't go on. They had to cancel it. He never got to make his remarks. And so as you know me, being a defender of the freedom of speech, as much as I take issue with Ray Kelly, I take bigger issue of the students at Brown who didn't allow him to have his say.
Yeah, one of the things, my thing, especially about college campuses, colleges are supposed to be a place for the exchange of ideas. Whether the ideas are good, bad, or indifferent, you should have the ability to at least propose or expound on your proposed argument, whether it's distasteful, whether it's heinous, whatever it is. If they've granted you that platform, I'm pretty sure they're also granting someone else time for a rebuttal. In most college facilities where they have these kinds of discussion. So to not let someone express whatever their take is on whatever the subject matter, especially on a college campus, flies in the face of free expression, freedom of speech. It's not like he's crying fire in a crowded theater. He's there to express and discuss.
Right.
And for students to do that flies in the face of propriety, common sense. What's the word we're looking for?
I mean,
freedom of expression.
Exactly.
In the right platform. And I can't condone that either, as much as I do not like Ray Kelly's position on stop and frisk, as much as we have documented with statistics how erroneous that approach is.
Right.
He can get up on any platform and say what he wants.
He definitely has the right to defend himself, to express his point. And by contrast, a few years ago, Columbia University let Mahmoud Ahmadinejad speak. And he has a much more negative appeal to Americans than Ray Kelly, but he was allowed to speak, even though Columbia did. I remember the Columbia president did have something to say in response at that event, but the mic was handed to him, and he was allowed to speak.
So the former president of Iran got his chance to say what he wanted to say, whatever propaganda he wanted to mouth off.
Exactly.
So
he had the chance, and
Ray Kelly could at least have had that chance too.
I agree. Providence, the students of Brown, I'll have to give you a demerit on this one.
Definitely. But hey, stop and frisk is a serious topic. When you start dealing with constitutionalities, people's rights being abrogated at the whim of some plainclothes or uniform officer just because they feel like it, that's not acceptable either. So, but speaking of stop and frisk, talk to us about the shop and frisk
Right.
Ray Kelly too.
That's rather. It's actually
another local story.
Another
yes.
local story, and it's a rather easy segue too.
Yeah.
Apparently, we've had a number of incidents, starting with one with a young man at Barney's, I guess.
Barney's, the men's, or I think it's primarily a men's clothing store.
Even I have gone in there
Manhattan.
in search of a suit.
I used to shop at Barney's, but I'll tell you about that.
That's a different. Okay.
Yes.
But apparently, he purchased an item of significant value. It was a belt.
Yeah, it was a very expensive belt.
Expensive belt.
Yes.
And it was a little.
It was paid for it.
Paid for it with his credit card. It was a perfectly good sale.
Credit or debit, I forget which. I think it might have been a debit.
Yes.
But it was a valid sale. It went through.
It went through. There was no issue. There was no question about whose card it was at the time of the sale. It wasn't denied or anything. But as he left the store, he was detained by police, who kept him, I guess, for a few hours, as they first alleged that
he had stolen the belt.
They alleged, and there was no way that he could afford such an item. That was the allegation. That's how that's what he said. The police
said.
Yes.
Right.
So now he has an attorney.
We left out the key part of telling you the story. The young man was a 19-year-old, I believe, African American male. That's what makes it newsworthy.
Absolutely.
Because he was stopped for shopping while black.
It was a simple sale. It should have been nothing other than, I have my belt, I can go home now.
I have paid for my belt.
Yes.
I am going home now.
Yes.
Except he didn't get home.
No.
So it turns out that the young man and his family did what any law-abiding citizen who feels their good name has been impugned, maligned, and trod upon. They filed a suit.
As
the
I would
report
have.
I saw on one of the local television stations said that they had filed a suit.
And they obviously asked for an apology from Barney's, and their flag was grabbed or borrowed, however you want to put it, by Al Sharpton, and who apparently met with the CEO of Barney. I believe he went with the family as well. I believe they went.
I had not heard that development on the story, so the Reverend Al has now appeared on the scene of this breaking shopping while black story.
Yes.
Okay.
He's added himself to the volley of complaints about what we now call shop and frisk.
Okay. The interesting. Go ahead. The interesting thing is I just heard you late last week, around Wednesday or Thursday, that the basketball music mogul Jay-Z is supposed to be coming out with a clothing line in collaboration with Barney's.
With Barney's.
So I had a discussion with a young man, just basically he wanted to know what my take was on whether Jay-Z should be stopping his clothing line or walking away from Barney's. And I said, look, Jay-Z's a businessman. Now, he has clout, so he has every opportunity to use that clout to get Barney's to do what's right, if he chooses to do that.
If he chooses to do so.
I have no idea what his take is on shopping while black, shop and frisk, whatever we want to term it, but I understand that there are people like Ray Charles who refused to play in Georgia when they wouldn't desegregate their seatings, and Stevie Wonder who's not going to play in the state of Florida because of the Florida's stand your ground laws.
Absolutely.
And so there are people in the entertainment industry who have big footsteps and big clout, and they sometimes use it in the interest of what they feel is justice, in the interest of what they feel is in supporting the rest of their community. Were I in Jay-Z's shoes, I would follow Stevie Wonder's example and say, okay, if you want my line, if you want us to continue this arrangement, then please do something about making sure you do some redress for this young man and his family, whether it's monetarily, whether it's a public apology, all of the above, and maybe more. That would be my approach. I wouldn't say I'm not going to do business with you. I'd say for us to continue doing this business, we need to go down this path, and you need to go down this path before we go down this path.
I think that would work because, as you know, Jay-Z's fame is portable. He can take his clothing line elsewhere.
Yes, sir. Yeah,
so
exactly right.
he could easily add that little tidbit to the discussion.
He indeed has leverage.
Yes.
Let's put it that way.
Yes.
But hey, I'm not his advisor. I'm just hoping that he is one of these stand-up kind of persons who would be willing to do something for the not so privileged.
And he initially did not respond. I haven't caught up to the news wires yet. He may have since. But initially, when he was questioned about this, there was no immediate response from Jay-Z. Maybe I'm a little bit behind.
Was it an in-person, hey, what are you doing about this? Or
It was
something?
It was direct. It was your TMZ type of caught in the street type interview.
Oh, okay. And he had no comment at the time.
At the time.
Okay, that might be wise. You might want to just hunker down, think about it, have a measured
Have a discussion.
Yeah,
Sure.
with who your advisors are. That's not to say he will come out yay or nay, but that we give him the benefit of the doubt and hope for the best.
I do
this
too.
This is NYBJ Media Watch, a production of EBT Educational Productions in association with the New York Association of Black Journalists. I am Eric Tait.
And I'm Bob Anthony.
And so the big national story or non-story that's been in the news for the last couple of weeks after the manufactured shutdown crisis has been the healthcare website.
Right.
So what's your take? Bob, you're a big guru on webs and websites and technology, and is there any real that the Republicans are trying to make about this website, and put it in perspective for our viewers?
Well, I remember I tried at the very beginning of the month to log into the system, and I actually went through pretty deep. I wasn't bumped off. I wasn't prevented from getting an ID, and then I stopped. But I'm going to continue my hunt a little bit later this month. I can use a better health plan. But to start this way, it's clear that the system wasn't ready. So you'll have to give the Obama administration a negative on that, because when you build a system like this and you know there's going to be heavy traffic, as soon as you turn on the computers, you build it so that it scales easy. In other words, you contact other vendors, you have servers on standby, and you're ready for the deluge, and you have servers basically you can add and take off as you need them. That part of it apparently wasn't ready. Whoever designed the original system did not have it ready to scale because it crashed, and or it would loop people into a delay, and they'd get tired and go and do something else. So, in that respect, on the technical aspects of the system, no, they were not ready. Is the system broken? No. It can be built out to what would work just fine. The design can be simplified, and that's a learning curve. So that's my opinion. Design
as a tech guy,
yes.
That's exactly why I'm asking, because as a non-tech journalist, I look at what's going on about let's fire somebody, let's chop off some heads.
Right.
I'm listening to what I consider hyperbole, and then I look back historically, and I've discovered, when they rolled out Social Security, they had a total mess back then.
It was.
And when they recently rolled out Medicare Part D, which was just a few years ago, they had an even bigger mess back then. And guess what? Social Security is working fine.
Right.
Medicare Part D, even though a lot of people still hate Medicare Part D, is working fine for what it was designed to do.
Right.
And so I'm just sort of nonplussed when I keep hearing people saying, oh, well, Kathleen Sebelius is going to be on the hot seat and they need to be firing people left and right. I'm going, hey, what is it correct? Is the March of 2014 the real deadline when this thing goes into effect? So they have from now
there's a little time in the schedule, which is the point I couldn't get.
I haven't been able
And
to
someone put it extremely well this morning on the radio. When your company opens up your the selection window so that you can change your plan, it's usually a 2-week or a 1-month window. It's relatively brief. This window, as you said, is open until March of 2014. There's plenty of time to repair it. I'm not arguing that the system was designed well,
but I really think to kill it.
No.
What's that old saying? Throwing out the baby with the bathwater or something, one of those cliches?
That's essentially what it would be.
So, okay.
But from what I've seen technically, just from how, and I'm not a IT guy, I'm a journalist first, I do know my tech, but you design a system like that to scale real easy, and you hire outside firms to add capacity when you need it.
Okay.
It's like the last day, I hate to use American Idol. I mean, hate to use that as an example, but on the last day when everybody's voting, you scale the system so that you can take the calls coming in and the votes going out over the internet. That wasn't done here, so.
All right. So I'm going to say one of my out on a limb predictions that come January, this may well be a much ado about nothing story. That's one of my out on a limb predictions for Media Watch. We don't do too many out on a limb predictions, but come January, I'm going to say this was a much ado about nothing story.
Covered well in terms from the real networks. We're not going to deal with Fox here.
Yes. I haven't been watching the real coverage on it. I didn't even watch the congressional hearings because I figured that'd be a waste of time. Why are we holding hearings on a technical glitch that's going to go away in a couple of months?
And now you and I are on the same page. I didn't understand that either. We should be talking to the IT guys.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm not wasting my time watching congressional hearings about a story that's not a story. So.
Okay.
But anyway,
we've had a plethora of stories that weren't stories.
Yes. And we've had a plethora of crises that should never have been crises. Right. But we're not going back and beat other dead horses. So now the entertainment, cultural area that we really want to get into, that I would like to get into with you, but you haven't seen 12 Years a Slave yet.
No.
Have you looked up at any of the reviews or been privy to any of the online discussion? Because there's been a buku series of discussions online about that film.
And that's how it affects me first. I see the
traffic is just
the traffic on Twitter. Whenever anything airs, whenever a review was printed, all of a sudden I see the sudden
blows up
on Twitter or elsewhere or Facebook, and you and I are connected with a lot of journalists on Facebook, so we see the conversation there. And a lot of it is a little hotter than you would see in print.
It's interesting. It's interesting because I've been exchanging emails with our good friend Joy Elliott and historian and genealogist Pearl Duncan. And Pearl knows this area extremely well because she's researched her own family tree from the European side and the African side via the DNA stuff, and she's gone back generations. So in writing her books on genealogy and history, she does tremendous research. So she knows this whole history of slavery extremely well. She's immersed in it as deep as I have been in it since I've been in it since 1991 when they discovered the African burial ground in Lower Manhattan.
Absolutely.
So from 1991, when we started working on Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home, right through to 2006, when we did the second radio series, Every Voice and Sing, which continued the first radio series, Then I'll Be Free to Travel Home, we've covered this historical arc.
Right.
We have dealt and dug into it, and so I didn't do any on the online conversations until I had seen the film. I haven't really done any. I've just been exchanging emails with Pearl.
Right.
but
you actually had a
went
chance.
to see. Well, and the interesting thing is, I went to see Al Santana's documentary, Salty Dog Blues, the week before I went to see 12 Years a Slave, and Al's documentary was the perfect primer to go see.
Is that what you would recommend?
No. Well, see 12 Years a Slave. Don't wait for Al's documentary. But you must see Al's documentary just because that talks about the same, what 12 Years a Slave actually does on the full arc of the film is it tells you how these enslaved Africans, and I haven't seen this in any review, how they refused to let some horrific people, godless people, soulless people, people with no spirituality, they refused to let them strip them of their sense of self, refused to let them strip them of their self-worth, and refused to let them strip them of their dignity.
Okay.
Even if they were enslaved, they fought like tooth and nail to keep that.
Keep that level.
And that's what that film actually shows. Now, most critics will say, oh, it shows you the horrors of slavery in such a brutal way, and that's what I keep seeing. Most white reviewers will say it's too horrific. It's a horror show. Steve McQueen didn't even come close.
Okay,
I'm serious.
All right.
When he shows you this whipping scene and all that, he actually, for the most part, puts a tree between you and the young lady who's being whipped. I mean, that's how sensitive he was to what the reaction was going to be. Once in a while, he'd come back to the other side. You'd actually see the whip hit her back. Well, he'd come back around to the tree, and so he and actually. He softened that scene because in the real autobiography, when an author tells you, he had to stake that young lady on the ground.
Okay.
Staked her out with her arms stretched out and her legs stretched out, and he whipped her on the ground with bare, naked flesh. Steve McQueen did not put
cinematically, that wouldn't have worked, I guess.
I might have done it, but Steve McQueen said, I'm not going there.
Not going there.
So he did it in a way that would actually let you know. And then he did it in 1/10. I mean, I'm giving you what I know from having researched Solomon Northup.
Okay, so you're saying that what we're seeing is good but terribly diluted.
Oh, yeah, not terribly diluted. He's giving you some strong stuff.
Okay.
But it doesn't even compare what the real stuff is.
Okay. We have about 2 minutes.
It is just, but aside from whether it's too strong, film is one of the best films ever made that I've seen.
Okay.
It's truly well structured. And the acting in that Ejiofor, I mean, his entire movie is about reaction.
I can say through personal experience, I don't hear you give too many kudos to too many movies.
I got to tell you, this is one film that people need to go see.
Okay.
There are a couple of shots in there that are bellwether shots that I'm not going to give away because people need to experience it themselves. But when I watched that, I went, man, this guy knows what he's doing. He really knows how to tell a story. And even that tough a story, he did it in such a way that the brutality is set in such a way in the settings, that Louisiana setting.
Okay, we have about 40 seconds.
You get that offset on what kind of pastoral surroundings that this guy's in, but it's also a swamp, and so escape isn't that easy, and so there are all kinds of levels and layers, but this is a film worth seeing. We'll have to get into the corollary of what's going on now on television.
I'm going to get a chance. I'm going to try to get a chance to see it myself.
Yeah, but if I compare that to what's going on now with the Africans in America, many rivers to cross, we will have to talk about that on another time at another level because
we're out of time.
It's about 10.
But
this has been Media Watch. I'm Eric Tait.
I'm Bob Anthony.
And we'll catch you the next time.